In the last few years, Chile has become the Cristiano Ronaldo of Latin America. It was the country with the highest growth, had the most success, and sticking with our metaphor here, it scored the most goals. Also, for many classical liberals, Chile has been the benchmark for years. We could say they considered the Chilean model something of a dream in a world full of dark nightmares. And it was true, there were good reasons for celebration. Chile, which once was the poorest Spanish country in Latin America, became the richest in the region. It became the country with the highest life expectancy and the country with the best social services in the entire region. It is true that inequality is very high in Chile, but the entire population of Chile has benefited from the prosperity that the country has achieved over the past few decades. For the past 25 years, the income of the poorest people in the country has increased far more than the income of the wealthiest people, and their purchasing power has grown 6 times larger. All of this compares very favorably to other Latin American nations. As an example, in 1950, the average Chilean income was around a third of Venezuelan income. In a manner of speaking, Venezuelans were 3 times richer. A lot has changed since then, and today Chileans are much richer than Venezuelans. They also have a longer life expectancy. A Chilean lives an average of 8 years more than a person born in Venezuela. Now, comparing Chile to Venezuela or Argentina sure makes Chile look good. But when the comparison is made with other, more distant countries, for example those in Asia, the figures aren't nearly so nice. And further, it seems as if the country has stopped growing, which is certainly worse.
The Chilean slowdown.
In the last few years, the optimism and success, well, it's come to an end. In Santiago, the capital of the country, the displays of wealth and prosperity have left, making room instead for demonstrations and protests. Anger and despair have taken over, and, well, it's only logical. Economic growth has fallen for the last few years, and in 2016, unemployment increased while salaries remained frozen. Further, the youth can't find jobs, and both investment and exports have fallen. And the thing is that things aren't looking like they're going to get any better anytime soon.
In 2016, the Chilean economy grew by 1.5%. Chile's central bank's forecasts for 2017 are not a whole lot better, increasing to 2% from 1%.
And despite all of the growth of the last decades, 3 out of every 4 Chileans make less than $700 a month, so now you can probably understand their anger. These aren't the salaries that belong to a rich country. So all in all, the Chilean model seems to be failing, and there is one person who is responsible for this slowdown, and that's Michelle Bachelet, the current president of Chile.
The Revolution of Bachelet.
Michelle Bachelet was the president of Chile from March 2006 to March 2010. But in Chile, a president can't be elected to 2 consecutive terms. So Bachelet had to wait 4 years before she could run again for La Moneda, the name of the presidential palace in Chile. Well, after gaining the support of almost all the left-wing parties, including the Socialist Party and the Communist Party, Bachelet won the elections in November of 2013, and a few months later, in March of 2014, she became the president of the Republic of Chile again. In this second term, Bachelet decided to go through with reforms which were much more aggressive than the ones she came up with her first time around. Her first decision was to increase taxation on companies by almost 40%. Quite a dramatic move. She did it by raising the rates on profits and also by eliminating a bonus which meant companies could reduce taxation if the profits were reinvested in Chile. If you think about it, that rule about reinvestment was actually a really reasonable incentive. A country like Chile, which is far from being rich, needs factories, machines, businesses, technology, and investment. And this incentive encouraged the growth of all of these things. So the question is, what's the point of punishing companies providing this much-needed investment? And in addition to all of this, taxation on companies wasn't exactly low to begin with. Take a look at how things are now after Bachelet has punished these companies.
Chile has the second highest corporate taxes in the world, surpassed only by Japan, a much richer country with much larger companies.
And would you like to know the consequences of this measure? Well, investment has fallen by 30% since Bachelet came back to the presidential palace. And of course, less investment means less jobs, less growth, and therefore less tax revenue. In other words, they decided to eat the cake before they could even bake it, and well, that rarely works. That is why there has been a clear international tendency to reduce taxation on companies over the last few years.
Canada, the UK, and Ireland are some examples of countries where corporate taxes have been reduced. The new president of France, Emmanuel Macron, has also promised to reduce taxes.
Well, Chile, it's headed in the opposite direction. But do wait a second here, because, that's not all. The other two main reforms Bachelet has put through have resulted in a very similar outcome. Labor reform has made recruitment more expensive and has given more power to trade unions. Some might like the sound of this, but it means more cost for companies, which, when added to the increase on taxation, means there is even less investment, less competition, and less exports. Essentially, all of this has caused, a whole lot of problems. On the other hand, Bachelet's tried to pass an ambitious reform to turn the private college education system into a public, free-of-charge service. The problem is, dear VisualPolitik viewer, that this model is very expensive, and some say the solution to the problems of education is to improve the quality of the universities themselves instead of making them into factories printing diplomas. But anyway, the thing is, Bachelet couldn't pass this reform, and in her attempt to do so, she turned the whole education system upside down. For example, she has reduced the amount of investment that was planned to improve the quality of these universities. But okay, now you might be wondering, what do the citizens of Chile think about all of this? Well, let's look closely.
62% of Chileans believe that Michelle Bachelet's government must delay or at least moderate some of the reforms that have recently taken place in the country, especially educational reform.
It feels as if Bachelet was working towards an ideological change rather than a formula which could actually solve national problems. In fact, all these reforms and hostility towards private corporations have led Chile to suffer the worst economic period for decades. And, do you know who is most negatively affected by this situation? Well, that's the poor and the working class. After all, the wealthy already have a good standard of living. The thing is, Bachelet leaves the country with a crisis, with a growing public deficit, with the highest public spending of the last 26 years, and, frankly, with a damaged economy. But now that you know all of this, you might be wondering, besides Bachelet, what are the biggest weaknesses in Chile? Well, let's have a look.
Chile's weaknesses.
It is a fact that Chile doesn't like foreign professionals. It's a bit strange for a country like Chile because they seem to have been incapable of attracting foreign professionals. Immigration is only 2%, and that's a problem because it affects entrepreneurship, innovation, and trade.
Why won't Chile grow? Because it is full of Chileans. Ricardo Hausmann, director of the Center for International Development of Harvard University.
Generally speaking, foreign professionals tend to be more entrepreneurial, which helps the economy to diversify.
In Chile, the rate of entrepreneurship among immigrants is 4 times higher than that among native Chileans.
The second problem is that the so-called social ladder is not working. That is to say, there are no changes in the social classes. If you're born poor, you die poor. If you're born rich, you die rich. In fact, the country is really controlled by 7 families whose wealth is equivalent to 17% of the national GDP. This might seem unimportant, but when the social ladder and competition don't work, it means the family name is more important than talent and effort. The opportunity cost for the country is huge. And these families usually have quite special relationships with power. Consider this.
Bachelet's son was charged with corruption. Andronico Luksic, one of the most powerful men in Chile and the owner of the Bank of Chile, was also involved in the scandal.
Yep, even the Bachelet name has been spoiled with corruption. And then there's the bureaucracy. I'm sure you've heard that Chile is a very free economy. Well, when you take a closer look, you can see it's also very bureaucratic and it has all kinds of regulations. For instance, Chile can't import second-hand cars and foreign workers don't have access to a bank account, so, it certainly seems as if it could be more free. Mark Twain said there are 3 kinds of lies. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. The figures in Chile, they probably have some of that. The next elections in the country will take place on the 19th of November 2017, and one thing is for sure. If Chile wants to go back to the good times, they must change direction. So, well, that's our opinion here at VisualPolitik, and now we'd love to know what you think. What is your opinion of Bachelet? What do you think of the Chilean model? Well, please leave your answers in the comments below and click like if you did enjoy this video. I'd also like to take this time to thank our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast for providing some of the voiceover vocals for this video, and do not forget to subscribe for brand new videos every Monday and Thursday, and as always, I'll see you next time.
La victoria de esta jornada no es personal. Es un sueño colectivo el que triunfa. Es la voz de ustedes.